Listeners, this is an unprecedented situation. That's right, this week's episode is so stuffed with facts, knowledge, and information, and a wonderful special guest that we had to break it up into two parts. So please enjoy the first half of our episode 147, starting now.
Hey, Gavin.
Hey, Louie.
Can you believe we are back in our comfort zone, the darkness of night?
And by comfort, you mean I'm wearing shorts because it's boiling.
Sweetie!
Mama, I'm boiling.
The shorts are shorting, and I feel very blessed. I went and saw Illinois on Broadway yesterday for my birthday, and I just have to say, already Tony Award for Best Shorts on Stage.
They do give that out every year.
Your best performance by Thighs. Also, Josh O'Connor in Challengers. Oscar for legwork.
I was going to say, I don't think you can cross Tony Oscar. If Josh O'Connor wins both the Tony and the Oscar for Challengers.
I mean, it's so good. Yeah, all genre. He's going to EGOT just for his legs in Challengers. But anyway, hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mixed Reviews.
We are a film podcast where we take a film subject such as an actor, director, or a mini genre. We take a month. We watch as much as we can. We read everything we could possibly can. Sometimes we listen to it too. And then we give all that information back to you. And we talk about what we like and what we don't like.
The reviews are mixed, baby. Sometimes we like some stuff. Sometimes we don't like stuff. But it's all fine. We're all here to have fun. And, fill in some blind spots, become better cinematic viewers, people of the world, which is always a good time.
One, I thought you were going to say cinematic citizens, and I thought that was a weird thing to say. So obviously my brain's the one that's broken.
Okay, wait, but cinematic citizens kind of sounds cute.
Well, we'll make merch. And second, and by that I mean you'll make merch. And second, I do want to mention, because I keep forgetting to do it, and it's just because I'm a major fuck up, we are a proud member of the Glitterjaw Queer Podcast Collective, which has an amazing spate of podcasts that you can go listen to after you finish listening to this one. But importantly, finish listening to this one first.
Most importantly, yes, we love being part of the Glitterjaw family. Speaking of family, we have an extended family here today. We are not alone, Gavin.
Baby.
What if it was a child that we had on the show?
We actually have a child. We weren't expecting that, were you?
Yeah. We do not have a child. We, in fact, have one of my coworkers from the Daily Beast. It is entertainment editor, writer extraordinaire. It is Allegra Frank.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here. Hi, guys.
Allegra, we've been through so much together in the short amount of time we've worked together, but I'm so
really
happy. We really have. But I'm so glad that we could take some time away from work and that horrible life, and have some fun and talk about films and things of that nature. So
about films, yes.
Yes, you're a cinematic citizen, I can tell.
Citizen, yes. I am a cinematic citizen. I am definitely living in that world, baby. And we've been living in a very specific world for the last, I feel like, many weeks since we've been talking about doing this. So I'm excited to move out of that world finally.
Baby, okay, movies are about escapism. That's where we're going.
Right. And by the time we finish every subject, we certainly want to escape them. So I understand. I get it.
Okay, but before we talk about the subject today for this episode that Allegra brought to us, we have a little bit of old business. So first, or Gavin, let's first talk about May Madness, right?
Excellent. So this year we are bringing back May Madness. For those of you who don't remember, last year we did a little bracket system called May Madness because we don't know when sports are. And so this year we're going to, because we've gone monthly, it's going to now intersect with whatever our subject is going to be in June, which we normally reserve for Pride. So this year, May Madness has a theme, which is all queer edition.
You've collected a great group of subjects for us, for the people to vote on. any one of them would be very fun and cool to deep dive on. So I'm excited. No matter who wins, it's going to be a great episode.
That's right. In this bracket is a lovely lineup. We have Greg Araki versus the Wachowskis. We have Elliot Page versus Ian McKellen. See a little X-Men connection there. We have
Love
Rock
that.
Hudson versus Jodie Foster's, our Closet Warriors. And we have Kristen Stewart versus Tessa Thompson, our Queer Gals. So what's going to happen is, essentially, you're going to have all of May to vote for these on our Twitter. And also this year, I'm going to extend the voting to our Instagram, which means I have to do math. So hopefully I get it right. There's going to be those 4 heats. They'll whittle down to 2 heats. And by the end of May, we will have one final heat, and that will be decided by our Patreon listeners. That's right. So if you want to make sure that your pick is our June subject, you have to sign up for Patreon, which I think you can do for like free for like 3 days too. So stack the system, folks.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, voting is always fake. I've said that a million times. No, I'm kidding.
Is that you every November? I thought it was.
That's me.
I thought I recognized
That's me.
you.
No, but that lineup is so good. I am gagged by the Closet Warriors. So it's gonna be very fun. So yeah, make sure you vote. I think by the time this is out, that will be happening. So please go find that on our Instagram and socials, all the places. And I guess like the last piece of old business is we asked you guys to go vote on Twitter. From our last episode, we talked about the one, the only Miss Deborah Carr, the Glenn Close of her generation.
Vroom, vroom.
Vroom, vroom. To vote for your favorite movie, and here are the results. In last place was my pick, I See a Dark Stranger with 4%. In third place was Gap.
You know what, though? I do want to say I applaud you for going outside the box and finding something new, because I think that's one of the best facets of this show, is
Thank
being
you.
able to like find something new and really appreciate it. So
Thank you. I have film taste and class and whatever. Gavin's pick came in third place with 9%, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. Tea and Sympathy, which I believe was Owen's pick. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Was a 17% in second place. And a very rare, like none of our picks came out on top with a whopping 70% Black Narcissus, which is a stunning movie. So
yeah. It's just
all
a
good things.
true banger, and so I can't fault anybody, but I do like that our audience listened to that episode and was like, "You're wrong."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But honestly, the reviews, they're mixed.
Yeah. Allegra, are you familiar with Deborah Carr's work?
I am not, but I love the drama that she is causing in this friendship.
she sure is. She sure is. Okay, great. Well, then that wraps up Miss Deborah Carr. We salute you. We thank you so much. And now we're moving on. Allegra, why don't you tell the fine folks who we're covering today and why you have chosen this person?
Yeah, we are talking about Steven Spielberg, baby, who obviously is one of the most celebrated, well-known figures in Hollywood and modern film history, probably all of film history, honestly. He's just sort of ushered in the modern blockbuster. He's dabbled in so many different genres. He's made a heck of a lot of money at the box office, won a lot of awards. And all of that is well and good, but I feel like before this project, hadn't really seen a ton of his movies. Like, he was one of those guys where he's always in the ether. Everyone's seen some Spielberg, but then I looked at his filmography one day and I was like, oh, I've like seen less than half of these, which he has so many freaking movies. So that's still kind of a lot of movies. But I was like, oh, I feel like I have such a huge like gap in my film knowledge being a cinema citizen. And it felt like this was a good opportunity to fill in what is a really big gap. And it is a really big gap.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways is what I have learned.
It's funny. I was talking to my sister yesterday, and we were talking about Spielberg, and I told her what we were doing. And I was like, we didn't grow up watching his movies, right? And she was like, no. And I was like, I wonder why. I mean, like you, Allegra, like I had never seen E.T., never seen Jaws, never seen any of the Indiana Jones movies. Or that's a lie. I did see like the Shia LaBeouf one.
Oh
LOL.
my
Oh, so the best
God.
one. Yeah.
The best one, yeah.
Well, yeah. Commonly referred to.
But like that was when I was
Ay, ay,
that was when
ay.
I was older. Like as a child, like we weren't a movie going family. Like my parents weren't like, here's money, go to the theater. That wasn't fucking happening. And yeah, it was just kind of like you said, like they were around. I knew E.T. existed. I've seen clips of Jaws, you know. But yeah, just not part of my culture. And so I too had a very large cinematic gap to fill. And man, it feels like he works in like two modes. It's like boys of America, and then like boring dad. Like it's just I like
You heard it here first.
he ventures outside those two zones every once in a while, but like a lot of it is just like, wow, American boys, this is what they like, huh? And then dads. Whoa. What about you, Gavin?
It's funny. I actually also didn't really grow up with Spielberg, which I know sounds shocking. Now, I did come from like a movie-going family, but my parents tend to skew towards weirder stuff. I feel like my dad was always like wanting to rewatch the things that he loved as a child, like 1960s spy films and like motorcycle movies. And
Gavin, you're like, my parents were different.
yeah, exactly. I'm not the same boy I used to be. And my mom, like, if it wasn't like Beaches or Steel Magnolias or Gone with the Wind, like, she wasn't sitting down for it, basically. Which, Gone with the Wind, like, problematic, Mom. Sorry. Well, it's beautiful anyways.
Beautiful movie.
Sorry,
Beautiful
Mom.
gowns. Sorry, Mom.
Sorry, Mom, you're canceled.
but I do remember seeing both Jaws and E.T. as a kid, and E.T. never left the impression on me that it did other children, but Jaws certainly did. I was apparently terrified to go to the bathroom at one point because I thought sharks would come up from the toilet.
That's what happened.
Oh my God.
I'm okay to embarrass myself. It's fine. But actually, I have a funny side story. A couple years ago, maybe a decade ago at this point, I met Paul Verhoeven, the film director who directed Showgirls and Starship Troopers and RoboCop. And the first thing I said to him was like, a lot of kids grew up on George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, but I grew up on your movies. And without missing a beat, he just said, "Oh no."
Oh no.
You were like, listen, I was a horny child and Starship Troopers did something to me.
Yeah, exactly. Those co-ed showers.
Yes.
So my like exposure to Spielberg was I think what the average exposure to Spielberg is for somebody that's not like a fanatic. I never watched E.T. multiple times as a kid. I honestly had not seen Jaws since I was a teenager. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, even less. And I do understand his place in film history. I got so nervous, Allegra, when you picked Steven Spielberg, because I think anybody else who starts a film podcast and does what Louis and I are doing, which is we're cornered the market a little bit, but like I think they would reach for Spielberg pretty early on, and and we did not, because I also think it's so divisive. Like, if you say there's a certain number of artists in the world, the Taylor Swifts, the Beyoncés, that are above critique. And I feel like if you say the wrong thing, you're just going to engender anger from people. So everybody out there that's listening to this, please be kind, because all we're doing is expressing our opinions, and we're not coming from a place of anger or hate. But we will talk about that he's not a perfect filmmaker. He's not, he may be the most popular, but it's not always the best.
You know what I thought? So I thought about like, we love coming on this podcast and just like, we have some legendary heroic type figures, directors, John Hughes, and
ruining them.
And then we just don't have some very kind things to say. And not that I don't have kind things to say about Steven Spielberg, and I don't think he's on that level, but like he is not above critique and criticism. There's a lot of things about his movies where I was like, where are the women? Like, what is going on?
Totally. I had that same dang question.
I'll start the controversy. I'll start right away. I found an interview with him where he referred to The Color Purple as his art movie, and then also said that it's a movie with all black people, and it's the first time a movie with all black people made money.
Color Purple had a very low concept. I didn't think anybody would see that movie. It made over $100 million in America. And I thought that was my art film. I thought, my God, it's an all-black cast, and an all-black film has never really been that successful, except a couple of police pictures. And so that surprised me.
Ellen, that's not true.
Yeah.
So I just want to get that out of the way. I was a little shocked when I heard that, because, and admittedly, like, this was 2 decades ago that he said this. I'm sure he's probably evolved on his opinion, but wrong, just wrong. I don't know the right, like, he's off the base on that one.
Right. Well, I mean, to be clear, he is a pretty typical like lefty boomer, right? Like, so he's got some, I think a lot of times his heart is in the right place, but he misses the mark on a lot of things. But, at the end of the day, like to what Allegra said earlier, like he is one of the greats, like, right? Like you can't talk about modern cinema without Steven Spielberg. And there's a reason for that. And we will probably be talking about him and his films till all of us are in the cinema citizen heavens up above. So with all that being said, why don't we get started and get into the rewind?
Steven Allen Spielberg was born December 18th, 1946, making him a cool 77, which is interesting because I feel like there are a lot of filmmakers that are in their late 70s have decided, like, this is going to be my last movie, or I'm winding down. I've not seen Spielberg say any such thing, and honestly, more power to him.
Yeah.
Make films until you can't. He was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, to his mother, Lee, who was a restaurateur and a concert pianist, and his father, Arnold Spielberg, who was an electrical engineer involved in the development of computers. Both have unfortunately passed away, Lee in 2017 and Arnold in 2020. So Arnold lived into his hundreds.
Wow.
Yeah. He grew up Reform Jewish / Orthodox Jewish. He's talked about how religion really played a part in his growing up, that it was like sort of strict, that he had like a very free child. I mean, go watch The Fabelmans. He had a very free childhood, but also it was
You're literally just reading the plot summary of The Fabelmans right now.
Exactly. But religion played a huge part in his life. His grandfather Shmuel had escaped to Cincinnati in 1906 to avoid being drafted into the Russian army, and that's sort of like how his family got here into America. He also has 3 sisters, Anne, Sue, and Nancy, who I love. And if you've not seen the documentary Spielberg, which I believe is on HBO, all 3 are in the documentary, and they're so I love them. I love them. I want to hang out with Spielberg's sisters. In 1952, his family moved to Haddon Township, New Jersey, when his father was hired by RCA, and he attended Hebrew school from 1953 to 1957. And then in 57, they moved to Phoenix, Arizona, which I believe is where most of The Fabelmans actually takes place. He had a bar mitzvah when he was 13. I did mention he was religious, and his family was very involved in the synagogue and the church. But at some point during his adolescence, because it felt, he was one of the few Jewish people in his community, one of the few Jewish kids at his school, and he felt it was really alienating. He began to move away from his religion. He tells the story about his grandfather being on the porch shouting like Shmuel, Shmuel, which was his Jewish name, and kids being like, "Is that you? Like, what's happening?" And him being like, "No, like, cut it out." So because society does this to a lot of people, it makes people conform to their own wills, he decided to sort of bury his own Jewish heritage.
We always lived in neighborhoods where there were no Jews. And there was a real cultural divide in those days between Jewish people and Gentiles. A real cultural divide. I began to deny my Jewishness, began to deny everything that I had accepted as a child, and was not willing to accept if it was going to make me a pariah. I was ashamed of myself. I still feel ashamed of myself even remembering that long stretch of my life where I didn't want to be Jewish anymore.
The assimilation train is real.
Oh, it's very much real. They kept moving to different neighborhoods, and every time they did, it was just it was like we're the only Jews here. But then at about age 12, he developed this interest in film. He's talked about all of these various things that he would do prior to that. He was like, I loved crashing trains together. I loved like breaking rocks open. I collected comic books for a time. Like he was just obsessed with the sort of minutia of stuff. But like filmmaking really captured his imagination when he was trying to go for a merit badge in Boy Scouts.
And I went out for the photography merit badge, and I wanted to, and the requirement in the merit badge simply said you have to tell a picture with still photographs. And I made this little Western with my sisters and my friends and my next door neighbors and some of the Boy Scouts. And everybody had cowboy suits because we lived in Arizona, my goodness, you know. And so we all brought our cowboy suits out, and I made this little Western movie and showed it to the Boy Scout troop on a Friday night when we had a meeting, and they went ballistic. They were screaming and clapping and laughing, both with and at the movie. I didn't care. It was a response. And the response set me on fire.
And at age of 13, he then expands upon that. Oh, by the way, he did make Eagle Scout, just so you know.
Obviously.
He got that merit badge. By 13, he was like, okay, I'm really going to do it. And he makes a 40-minute war film called Escape to Nowhere, where he cast a bunch of classmates. This is also a story that's told in Fablemans. I like the idea that like he uses it as a way to try and achieve popularity.
It's just nuts. What the fuck was I doing when I was 13?
I was doing this. I didn't make a war movie, but I was doing this.
40-minute film?
Yeah. I had a friend with a VCR camera, and we would make movies all the time.
God.
I don't have that friend anymore, but we would.
This is having friend privilege, Gavin.
Yes.
Not all of us had those.
Right, because
so some of us weren't doing that.
Right, Steven Spielberg, according to Fablemans, was like, I've got 40 guys coming over this weekend to play war and film it. Like, what? Did I know 40 people when I was that age? Though I guess at that time, kids didn't have anything to do, right? I don't know.
So he enters it into a prize, and it wins at a statewide competition. And so he continues making films throughout his early teens. And by the time he enters high school, he'd made about 15 to 28 millimeter adventure films. And
Wow.
he would attend movies every Saturday at a local theater in Phoenix. Some of his favorites being Godzilla King of the Monsters, Captain's Courageous, Pinocchio, David Lean's Lawrence of Arabia, which if you've ever watched a documentary about Spielberg, he just loves to talk about Lawrence of Arabia. It's beautiful. I get it. I get it, Steven. It is a gorgeous movie. Let it go. He refers to that as the film that set him on his journey. In 1963, he makes a 140-minute science fiction adventure called Firelight. A lot of Firelight is in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, just like with technical wonder and wizardry.
So he started making long films at an early age. That's not, something that came into him as a professional. That was baked in.
That was baked in, exactly. Listen, once again, Lawrence of Arabia, the movie that set him on his journey. I also do love, by the way, in the Fablemans, and he's mentioned it before, like The Greatest Show on Earth is one of the movies that inspires him to make movies. That is single-handedly one of the worst films that ever won Best Picture. I have to get it out there. And I just think it's so funny. But also that goes to show you, like, inspiration can come from anywhere.
Even bad things.
Even bad things.
In the summer of 1964, he worked as an unpaid assistant at Universal Studios editorial department. And his family later moved to Saratoga, California, where he attended Saratoga High School, graduating in 1965. There's been... No one really can corroborate quite the myth of Spielberg. A lot of people say that he, found an abandoned office there and set it up and pretended to, work there. And, he would get people to call his office and everything. And that's how he was able to do it.
I got on the studio tour bus, took a jaunt around the back lot, and then at one point, they give you a bathroom break. And I never came out of the bathroom. I waited till I could hear a pin drop, and then came out. The bus was gone, and I was on the lot.
Word was that he went upstairs in the tower and took an office on the 6th floor, and nobody bothered him for 6 months.
I don't believe it. But you know what they said in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance? When the legend is bigger than the facts, print the legend.
I mean, he's never truly commented on this story. I think it's part of the American myth that
Yes.
is Steven Spielberg. If only it were that easy. Twere it that so simple.
Breaking and entering.
Yeah, just a little B&E between friends, whatever. He hated school, by the way. I should mention that, by the way. He's making his 140-minute films. He's terrible at it. You know, he's picked on. People don't like him. He can't focus on anything because he's always said he wasn't a great reader either.
I was 2 years behind the rest of my class, and of course I went through what everybody goes through, is teasing.
Yeah.
And I had to go through that for a long time. And so the teasing, you know, led to a lot of other problems I was having in school, but it all stemmed from the fact that I was embarrassed to stand up in front of the class and read.
Film, like, was his language. Like, was, I don't want to say love language. How creepy is that? But like, it was the, you know, the thing that he could express how he felt, which is important because that same year, his parents divorce. His father leaves the family and his mother remarries his father's best friend.
Ugh.
Well, yeah.
Talk about American myth. Like, Jesus Christ, that's a Taylor Swift song.
It's so dramatic, and I didn't know about any of that until The Fabelmans.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess probably since that documentary came out before, it was known at least, but that was like a shocking thing to learn about him, honestly.
The documentary, which came out in 2017, I watched it and I was like, oh, this is just The Fabelmans, but it is The Fabelmans with input from his sisters, with like an actual woman's perspective.
Shocking.
Sorry.
Shocking if true.
Yeah. So he moves to California and he stays with his father while his three sisters and mother remain in Saratoga. He moves to Los Angeles with his father, I should say. They're in Saratoga. And he applies to University of Southern California. They turn him down because of his grades, aforementioned bad student. He applied and enrolled at California State University, Long Beach, where he became a brother in the Theta Chi fraternity. Sorry, I think we had one of those at Vernonia, weirdly enough. I mean, not an official one. After taking a tour bus to Universal Studios, a chance conversation with the executive led Spielberg to getting 3-day pass to the premises, allowing him to come back to the next day. On the fourth day, he walked up to the studio gates without a pass, and security guard waved him in. I basically spent the next 2 months at Universal Studios, and that's how I became an unofficial apprentice that summer. That all deals with that American myth of...
I listen, good for him, I guess. But it just gets under my skin, like, of course this little white teen was able to, like, go up and, like, if anybody else, like, who was not a white straight man, just, like, do-si-doing up to Universal Studios, no, you're not getting in. Buy a ticket. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think about that a lot in his career. And listen,
he's good, but there are a lot of people who are good, and it's just about opportunity. And my God, he had opportunities left and right.
Right, and I don't want to, like you said, he's good. I don't want to chalk it all up to privilege, and I know there are people who would argue that it is not, but they're wrong because it's a systematic issue that we all face. I am a white man. I know I have definitely benefited from my white manness in my life.
You could have walked up to Universal Studios and they would have let you right
Baby,
the fuck
I've been
in.
trying. They said, get out of here. Baby.
That's true. They said, hold on. I see a little spring in that step.
In 1968, Universal gave Spielberg the opportunity to make a short film. He makes a 26-minute, 35-millimeter film called Amblin. What's that?
Foreshadowing.
Well, that's where...
that will be important later.
Yeah. The president of Universal at the time, Sidney Sheinberg, was impressed by the film and offered him a 7-year directing contract. I saw the world's worst copy of Amblin. It's almost no dialogue, and it's like two hippies on the road, and it feels maybe the least Spielberg of all Spielberg. So it's interesting that's the thing that sort of launches his career. It almost feels like him trying to tap into a counterculture that he didn't belong to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, clearly good enough. Sidney Sheinberg, he has an interesting relationship with him. He becomes he drops out of college to begin working on television productions for Universal, and he becomes the youngest director to be signed to a long-term plan with a major Hollywood studio. And like I said, he has this really interesting relationship with Sidney Sheinberg. He does one of the segments of the pilot episode of Night Gallery, which is the best segment, and also means that he has to work with our former subject of our show, Joan Crawford, in his first big directing gig. And she, being the Joan Crawford of it all, was like, get this fucking kid out of here. I do not want this. And Sidney Sheinberg was like, give him a chance. He's very talented. And guess what? She loved him.
Wow.
And they remained friends and talked frequently until she died.
Wow.
Yeah. So he tamed that beast. And listen, that bit of Night Gallery is so good and like clearly shows a lot of talent and feels so much more Spielbergian. And one of my favorite moments is she plays a blind woman who wants to receive a life-changing surgery that will allow her to see for 24 hours. So she's blackmailing a doctor into doing it for her. And of course, being a Twilight Zone-esque TV show, something bad happens. It doesn't quite work out for her. But there's this amazing scene when she's blackmailing the doctor and she's shouting about what she wants to see. And in between each word, she's like, I want to see lights. I want to see pictures. I want to see people. I want to see color. There's like a cut that just gets closer to her each time.
I want to see something. Trees, concrete, buildings, grass, airplanes, color!
And it's such a smart decision and such a stylistic decision for this story in the middle of this anthology movie where these other two directors really played everything that they were doing very straight.
Right. He's got style.
He's got style, exactly.
He's got style. Honestly, it sounds like he was just like a very charming young man.
Oh,
like I can kind
absolutely.
of like when we were talking about how he just like is walking onto Universal and getting a job. And I find that to be like, yes, white privilege, but it does sound like he was like very charming and very talented.
Yeah.
And like from the start, it's like kind of all of this is like very surprising to me.
In the early 70s, he tries to raise funding for his own independent film. It fails. So he turns to writing more with other people and also directing television episodes, including episodes of the series Marcus Welby, MD, The Name of the Game, Columbo, Owen Marshall, Counselor at Law, and The Psychiatrist. He also directed a pilot for a show that didn't take off called Savage. I was able to find it. It's pretty good and once again shows off his skill, but he did not want to direct this, and Sidney Sheinberg like pulled the like you're under contract thing. And he famously said to Sidney Sheinberg, I'm not in the Universal business. I'm in the Steven Spielberg business.
Okay.
It's a very Jay-Z, I'm not a businessman. I'm a business man. So he's like not getting along with his contract. But they still sign him to do 4 television movies. The first of which was Duel, which is adapted from a Richard Matheson short story. I watched this for our road trip movies episode, actually.
Oh.
I love this movie. I think this is one of Spielberg's actually like early Spielberg best. Like so good, so scary. It's about a man who basically like runs afoul of a truck driver and the truck driver chases him all around wherever he's going. But what's great is you never see the truck driver. Like it feels, the truck itself feels like an evil, omnipresent force.
What is the 90s version of this? When he's like
Joyride.
Joyride.
But that is like, has like, you get to see the truck driver in that movie, I believe, right? You get to.
All I remember is Candy Cane. And hey there, Candy Cane. And also, I think Paul Walker's like naked in it. So
Yes. Well, yeah. And Steve Zahn. Don't forget, for all the weird boys out there, don't forget Steve Zahn.
Don't care.
What's also really funny is around this time, Spielberg is palling around with basically who will become the greats of modern cinema. So he's hanging out with Scorsese. He's hanging out with Brian De Palma. He's hanging out with Francis Ford Coppola. He's hanging out with George Lucas. And what's great is they form this sort of camaraderie where they allow each other to see their early cuts of their movies.
I met George Lucas in 1967 when we were both in college. I was in Long Beach State. He was at USC. And I met a lot of the fellows in college and then in professional life. And it was not a clique, not a brat pack, nothing that people claim we were. It was just a bunch of filmmakers that weren't afraid to show our rough cuts to each other, and we weren't afraid of that kind of criticism.
When I got into the group of the movie brats, as somebody once called us, it was the first time I felt like an insider.
George Lucas said he saw Amblin. And what's great is all these people are in that Spielberg documentary, and it's very clear Scorsese is like the nicest human being in the world and will not say anything bad about anybody. And it's very clear that George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola are like, yeah, our friend Spielberg, whatever. Like Francis Ford Coppola literally says, like, yeah, Spielberg's talent is he knows what's popular, and he's able to put that out. And,
Wow.
Yeah. So Lucas is like, I saw Amblin and I was like, whatever, I'm not impressed. And then he saw Duel and was like, oh, like, he's got the goods. Like, he's incredibly talented. And so, you know, they're like, this is around where everybody's starting to make their, like, George Lucas is making Star Wars.
I love
In fact,
this idea of like these film bros like measuring each other's dicks, essentially. Like,
but I also, in their defense, and I know that's like, it's all it's like the same man. Like, it's all variation of the same man. It's all white man. But I do think it is really important to get feedback from people that you trust and understand your work. You know, famously, like, the opening crawl of Star Wars only occurs because Brian De Palma got so pissed off at the early screening when he showed all of his friends. He was like, what the fuck is this movie? Like, who's the dog? Like, why are they in space? I don't know who these people are. Are they aliens? Like, what is happening? And so, like, that came from that. So I do think that they've had good, like, Spielberg also said that, Scorsese brought him in to help him edit the final scene of Taxi Driver, and he's like, I couldn't be more different than like that movie, but like it was just like he needed a fresh pair of eyes. So I do think that there is like something nice about the camaraderie of getting that and experiencing that. But yeah, it is a little that like
film bros.
All the white guys, yeah, all the young white guys. He also makes Something Evil and Savage. Also, this is when this falls under this falls under that contract. That's when he famously tells Sidney Sheinberg to fuck off. And Something Evil, it's certainly a TV horror movie. I do want to, like, just for a moment pause and say, I think it's very easy to forget that Spielberg starts in horror. I think that Duel, Something Evil, Jaws, like, these are horror movies. Like, they're you know, and obviously, like, genre is a little malleable. Like, Jaws has adventure elements and whatnot too, but I think that's what makes a lot of his work really interesting, because he's able to tap into that bit of people. And I know you don't believe this, Louis. Everybody likes to be a little scared, and he is okay pulling that thread in a lot of his films.
I think I'm going to say no comment to everyone likes being scared, but I think
just a little.
I think like what he's good at, and what I kept coming back to is like, he's just so good at building tension, which is the root of like good horror films anyway. Right. But
yes,
like, my God, like watching The Post, I was like, they're literally arguing about whether they're going to press like go on the newspaper. Like, that's not scary, but like he builds a lot of there's tension that he's able to build over and over again.
He makes his theatrical debut in 1974 with The Sugarland Express, which is based on a true story about a married couple on the run, desperate to regain custody of their baby from foster parents, starring Goldie Hawn and William Atherton. I watched this for a Goldie Hawn episode. I did not revisit it for this. I do remember saying I liked it quite a bit, but it's, to me, the biggest like early red flag of like, oh, but he has this like really soft core, like not soft core, but like soft core. That where like, even though this movie has kind of a tragic ending, it's like still, I don't know. There's something, he will forever be an optimist. And I think sometimes he allows that to get in the way of his own judgment.
He's schmaltzy.
Yes. Allegra.
Yeah.
Do you?
Very sentimental. No, he's very sentimental. Although it's so interesting. I didn't end up watching Sugarland Express, but what I really loved about Duel is that it didn't feel optimistic. So, you know, right? Like the end of it is so dramatic and sad. Like, I mean, I don't know if we want to spoil it, but it is.
Oh, no, you can.
Sort of a haunting ending. Like, he finally gets the truck to go off the cliff, and he's like, "Oh shoot, I just killed a guy." You know, like that's how it ends. And it's such a freaking good movie. So then to immediately in his feature, like, you know, pivot to doing the schmaltzy. Like, I was hoping that he would sort of like build, because Jaws I feel like is a little bit different. We'll get to Jaws.
Yes.
But
it's coming next.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that actually schmaltz was there from like feature film number 1, basically, because I wouldn't expect that.
And once again, Sugarland Express is not all I mean, like it has kind of a real downer of an ending, but there's this like weird hope that pervades it, that you almost think like what it feels like it's fighting itself. Like it wants to have that edge that Duel has, but it also wants to be like, no, it's going to be okay in the end. And so it's such kind of a back and forth. But as you previously mentioned, producer Richard D. Zanuck and David Brown decided to take a chance and offer Steven Spielberg to direct Jaws based off the Peter Benchley book of the same name. It's about, I mean, I think everybody has seen Jaws at some point in their life.
It's about sharks.
Yeah. Well, one specifically. It's about a great white shark, a very large great white shark that is terrorizing Amity Island in New England, which I believe is a made-up place because the movie was shot in Martha's Vineyard. Spielberg, God bless him, does everything wrong in the production of this movie. He says it's going to take a certain number of days to make the film. I believe it goes 3 times over.
Filming overran by 100 days.
Yeah, filming overran by 100 days.
100
How
days.
is that allowed? They should have just, like, I feel like today they would have just been like, "You're out, dude. We're done."
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It had an estimated budget of $3.5 million, and the shooting schedule was supposed to be 55 days. As you mentioned, it went over 100 days. I believe it goes up to $9 million in terms of budget, so it triples its budget as well. Famously, there's a whole documentary about it called "The Shark's Still Working." The shark doesn't work, and so Spielberg pivots to not showing the shark as much as possible, which honestly is an incredible, smart idea, because as you were saying, Louis, it's tension. Like I think the brilliance of not showing the shark until literally almost an hour into the movie is that you, as an audience member, if you're into it, begin to question what's going on. You're like, is it a shark? Is something supernatural going on? Like, what is killing these people? All of that doesn't matter. That it went over budget, that went over. Oh, also famously, Spielberg didn't show up for the last shot of the movie because he was well aware of how much the crew hated him, that he thought that they were going to throw him into the ocean. And because of that, to this day, does not show up for the last shot of his movies.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so weird.
Yeah. It's like the baseball players that wear the same underwear or whatever. Like, he's just like,
superstition.
Yeah, not for me. As I mentioned, all of that doesn't matter because the movie's a massive, massive hit. It becomes one of the very first summer blockbusters. I do want to just rewind back to our Pam Grier episode and mention that I did bring this up during the Pam Grier episode, because what happens is films were at the time sort of tanking. People were not going to theaters. There was a lot of white flight out of cities. So who are the people left in cities? Black people. And what are black people seeing? They're seeing movies about black people. Blaxploitation becomes huge. Hollywood co-ops blaxploitation, starts making their own watered down versions. And then the blockbuster happens. And what happens then? Hollywood forgets all about black audiences. And they start making movies for white teenage boys.
Wow. And
Yeah.
look at us today.
The worst of us.
Yeah. I can't blame Spielberg for that. Literally, there is no way that he knew that this was going to work. He truly thought his career was over. Everybody thought his career was over. But
And then he wins 3 Oscars. LOL.
yeah, exactly. I was going to say, but you have to like talk about his role in the changing face of Hollywood, because truly Jaws is a huge portion of that. It's Jaws and Star Wars. Yeah, as you mentioned, it wins. Oh my God. Please tell me the cat's name.
Maggie.
Oh my God, Maggie, I love you.
Maggie, you can't do that.
Aforementioned, it wins 3 Academy Awards: Best Film Editing, Best Original Dramatic Score, and Best Sound. This also starts a lot of collaborations for Steven Spielberg. A lot of people, even though it's a mess, end up realizing he has a very singular vision and they want to be along for the ride, especially John Williams. I mean, that minimalist dun 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 is maybe one of the most famous film scores, maybe the most famous film score next to, I don't know, Psycho, which was what John Williams was going for. And the studio is instantly like, please make Jaws 2. And Steven Spielberg makes the best decision of his life when he says, no, thank you.
Can I say something controversial?
So smart.
First of all, I'm a music nerd. I was in band. I'm still in a marching band. Love John
We
Williams.
read your resume.
Thank you. Watching Jaws and watching like E.T., I was like, why is John Williams going so hard, like Olympic level music on these tiny,
because
nothing...
Louis, it's all he knows how to do, and I've had this problem.
Literally.
I've had this problem for years. I know people love John Williams. Guess what? Doesn't need every second of every piece of film. Music doesn't have to exist. There were plenty of films from the 40s that barely had music, and every movie that John Williams is involved in, it's like, I need to underscore you need to be told how to feel every moment of this film.
But it's not even like...
And then it's so weird because like when a Steven Spielberg movie doesn't have that now, it's like, oh, this feels so wrong. Like it honestly is so important to the vibe.
Those sweeping camera moves, because his camera is always moving. That's one of his hallmarks. And yeah, it does feel a little weird when you're like, wait, where's the strings? I don't understand.
But it's just like, they're just standing on a boat and there's like nothing happening. And like all of a sudden like an oboe and a clarinet are like doing runs. Like when I was watching E.T., the same thing. I was like, these are just boys riding bikes. Why the fuck is it like chariots of like flames? Like, it was just a lot.
Because that's their inner world, Louis.
I guess.
That's all that matters to them.
People are going to say I'm a fucking John Williams hater. I'm not, but like, this guy say that.
No, and I'm not either, but it is one of those things where like, it's once again, it has an effect on movies. And a lot of movies you see nowadays, like it's, score playing from moment one to moment, to the end scene. And a lot of that has to do with John Williams. Let's just call a spade a spade. So instead he goes over to Columbia and he goes to make Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And because Jaws is such a hit, because it stays in theaters forever, it has such cultural cachet. People are even like getting diagnosed with some sort of like psychiatric disorder about like seeing sharks afterwards. It really is, it's the cream of the crop. He is able to negotiate Final Cut, and he receives Final Cut for the rest of his career.
Wow.
He has never not, after Jaws, had the final say on his movies, which is pretty impressive.
How old was he at this point? Because wasn't he like, he must be like a young ingenue.
Yeah,
right?
So 77. I'm so bad at math.
He was like 22.
Yeah, 46 to 77.
Like he's 31.
That's 31. What I said.
22, yes, 31. Okay, so to have Final Cut at 31 off of two feature films and a TV movie is
there's
crazy.
A lot of filmmakers to this day who are his age that do not have Final Cut.
Yeah.
Or have to work outside the system, to get it. So but he goes over to Columbia and he makes Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This is the first big screen film that he like solo writes. He did receive several screenplays from, he had other people try and write it. Paul Schrader famously turned in a draft that Spielberg said was single-handedly the worst script he'd ever read. Which I think is, I mean, I like Paul Schrader, but like Shade Girl. Because he has say over anything, like he casts Richard Dreyfuss in the lead. He casts one of his favorite filmmakers, Francois Truffaut, in one of his few, actually, I think his only acting role outside of a film that he himself directed. And it's a movie about, if you've not seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind, it's a movie about aliens starting to contact Earth
through music.
Through music, and also through kind of causing the dissolution of this one man's marriage.
It was the first film I'd ever made about a family breaking up. I never made a picture of a family coming into colliding with their values or with their obsessions. And it was, so a lot of the breakup, which I wrote the script, so I think it was very evocative of my own life and the trauma that we all suffered. My parents announced to all of us that they were separating, and then later they would be divorcing. It may snow in the desert in Arizona, and that wouldn't surprise you someday, but your parents will never leave you. You will never be unaccompanied. And when I saw that happening, or my sister saw that all of a sudden what we considered to be normal with a mom and a dad, we were suddenly going to have a mom living there and a father living there, and we were going to separate and divide up. And that has informed many of my stories.
It's a huge hit. It's, once again, and it shouldn't, like, listen, for all intents and purposes, I don't think it should be, not because I don't like it. I actually think it's one of Spielberg's best. I think this is his art film, because if you watch the movie, you're left with so many questions, and he has no intention of answering any of them. And I think it's incredibly personal very early on. I think the whole, like, he tells a story in the Spielberg documentary about seeing his father cry at the dinner table because of the stuff that was going on with his mom, and getting up and calling him a crybaby and having to be like pulled out of the room, which happens in Close Encounters, like, is a true story that happens. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful, gorgeous movie, but it's his art movie. I don't know.
Weird.
I don't know how to,
It's weird.
Yeah,
It's weird.
It's a weird movie.
It's so good, but to follow up Jaws with that, like, I'm shocked that it did so well, because today a movie like that would not do that well. And I'm shocked that they allowed him to make that movie. I know that I know there's a director's cut, that's different, right? But he still had final cut. So I wonder how that works. I know I had watched like a slightly longer director's cut or something.
I believe it, fully loaded. Though he does have a very big, like, he doesn't like to do that because A, he has he has final cut, and B, because famously in the 90s, he removed FBI agents holding guns from E.T. after 9/11. And then in the like early teens, reinstated them because he was like, I don't think anybody should mess with their earlier. He's like, film is a portrait of who you were at that time, and you shouldn't like tinker with your own art, which I also think is really funny, because it's kind of like, remember your good friend George Lucas? George Lucas loves to tinker with his stuff. Francis Ford Coppola loves to tinker with his stuff.
I was sensitive to the fact that the federal agents were approaching a bunch of kids with their firearms exposed, and I thought I would change the guns into walkie-talkies. But E.T. that was because years had gone by, and I had changed my own views. I should never have messed with the archive of my own work, and I don't recommend anybody really do that. Your film, all our movies are a kind of measuring, it's sort of a signpost of where we were when we made them, and what the world was like, and what the world was receiving when we got those stories out there.
He's just being shady. Shady left and right. I do think he is secretly very shady. He may be very nice, but I think he's got some opinions.
He and George Lucas have a very funny relationship,
yes,
I think.
I think so too. Though he, once again, was the only one who liked the early cut of Star Wars that they saw. But also because I think he could see the vision, because it was all like green screen and not, there weren't effects put in. Everybody else was like, what am I watching? His first film as an executive producer was Robert Zemeckis' I Want to Hold Your Hand, which we talked about in our Robert Zemeckis episode. And then also like riding high off of these two massive hits, he's like, I can do anything. And he decides to make 1979's 1941, which is an action comedy written by Robert Zemeckis and his writing partner, Bob Gale. This is a, quote, comedy about Californians preparing for a Japanese invasion after the attack on Pearl Harbor. He had never done a comedy before. He truly thought, like, I'm funny, which I'll go to bat and say he is, in fact, funny. And the proof is every 90s cartoon for Warner Brothers. Like, without Steven Spielberg, we wouldn't have Tiny Toons, we wouldn't have Animaniacs. And those things, and Freakazoid, those things shaped my sense of humor. So, unless I'm calling myself not funny, I'm calling,
And you should.
Shut up, Louis. I saw it coming a mile away. This movie is Spielberg's flop.
It's not good.
No.
And probably going to talk about it later. Let's just say that.
Yeah. I the only thing I would like to stop on, just very briefly, probably due to working with Zemeckis, he cast Wendy Jo Sperber in a very minor role, but a scene-stealing role. I love Wendy Jo Sperber. She did not get enough flowers when she was alive. She unfortunately passed away from cancer a couple of years ago. She was a true light in this world and deserves only good things. So R.I.P. Wendy Jo Sperber. 1941 is not your fault. You were amazing in it. You were amazing in I Want to Hold Your Hand.
We talked about I Want to Hold Your Hand, and I like that movie a lot, actually.
Yeah, and she's so good in it. Yeah, such a shame. No one should die young, and no one should die of cancer. And when it happens, when it's both the things, it's very tragic. Stanley Kubrick famously, also a friend of Spielberg, Stanley Kubrick famously saw 1941 and was quoted as saying, "It's great, but not funny." Which is the most Stanley Kubrick HAL 9000 thing to say.
Just don't lie. Don't lie.
He produces another Zemeckis film, Used Cars, also not a commercial success. So he's riding low. And he truly, actually, even though he has this great deal and he's very young, thinks he's never going to work again. And George Lucas, his good friend, is like, I'm working on this thing. I'd really like you to direct it. What is your dream directorial effort? And Steven Spielberg's like, I want to direct a James Bond movie. And George Lucas is like, well, fuck that. They're never going to let an American direct a James Bond movie. Why don't we make our own James Bond? This is what I'm working on. And so he brings him Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is the first of the Indiana Jones. What is it? Quadrology now? Is that 5? Is that
Quintology?
Quintology.
Yeah.
The though he only makes 4, so it's the quadrology for him, I guess. Anyways,
should have made 3.
Yeah, you're right. It is the worst. I will go to bat for the newest one over the last Spielberg one. Why don't we get Indiana Jones out of the way? Like, why don't we talk about all the Indiana Jones just to get it? Raiders, great, gorgeous, beautiful gowns, love it. Adventure, fun. Who doesn't love whips? Girls with, things written on their eyelids, love it. Karen Allen, love Karen Allen. Nazis, melt their faces, fuck them.
Yeah. Also some horror stuff going on here.
That's exactly it. I think that's James Mangold's big problem with the latest Indiana Jones movies is he doesn't come from a horror background. And I think all of the other, even the bad one, all have a horror element to them and are able to elicit that same tension that you were talking about, Louis. And, sorry, James Mangold. I did really like it. I had fun. I thought it was a fun adventure, just not scary. And it's funny because, Raiders of the Lost Ark, especially Temple of Doom, has a ton of horror. I would say Last Crusade, not as much, but does have like a crazy like horror moment at the end of the movie.
Well, they have Jesus in that one, so
yeah. If I had to pick my favorite, I would say it's Last Crusade. I think it's because to me it's the most Spielberg. It's the most like daddy issues. And that's, you know, I was talking to Louis about this yesterday when I saw him for his birthday. We're not really supposed to talk about the auteur theory because inherently it's sexist and it also like denies the contribution of everybody else who worked, you know, writers and cinematographers and whatnot. But I would make a strong case that like Steven Spielberg has very much a like clear linear line, has a clear line through his work that is all about childhood and not growing up and fairy tales and fucking like destroying his father. And he's talked about how he really, along with suppressing his Judaism, he also really hated his father for a long time. He didn't understand how his father was able to let his mother go in that situation. And he really took umbrage with this. And I think I think Close Encounters of the Third Kind is him trying to deal with that idea of a father who would rather go off and experience a different life than be with the family that he's with. I think the relationship Indiana Jones has with Sean Connery in The Last Crusade is very much like there's that great scene where they're like sitting there and he's like, hey, when was the last time we had a drink together? And Sean Connery's just like fucking ignoring him. He's like, well, adventure, boy, we have to go hunt down stuff. Jesus. And so
what do you want me to say?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, son, we've been hit. And I think it's just absolutely beautiful.
It was just the two of us, Dad. It was a lonely way to grow up. For you, too. If you'd been an ordinary average father like the other guys' dads, you'd have understood that.
Actually, I was a wonderful father.
When?
Did I ever tell you to eat up, go to bed, wash your ears, do your homework? No, I respected your privacy, and I taught you self-reliance.
What you taught me was that I was less important to you than people who'd been dead for 500 years in another country. And I learned it so well that we've hardly spoken for 20 years.
It's also the funniest, so like I'm always down for a good laugh.
It's so funny. I was
so
like
funny.
not expecting it to be as delightful as it was. Honestly, after Temple of Doom, I was like, I don't think these movies are good actually. Like I felt like Raiders was maybe a little bit of a fluke, but then Last Crusade, I think that was my favorite too. Like it's just such a delightful adventure movie that's funny and the characters are great. I feel like they should have just stopped there. Like it really was just kind of the perfect crystallization of everything. I think you were saying like that Spielberg does.
Can we talk
really
a little bit about though, like, so in The Last Crusade, and I just was thinking about like all the boyness of these movies. Like it's I mean, and not to say that girls don't like adventure and stuff, but it's very like, I also did not realize, I think after I watched Temple of Doom, I was like, oh, it hit me that this is James Bond. I didn't know that. Because he's fucking every woman in the movies.
Yeah.
And they're different every time for like no apparent reason. Like I was like, when I started watching the second one, I was like, wait, what happened to the girl from the first one?
Yeah.
And then in the third one, I found it extremely shocking that not only did this woman turn out to be a Nazi, but like she also fucked his dad. And they like are just like LOLing about it. And I was like, if this is not the most like man like punch on the shoulder type thing, like it's just a little bit bizarre to me. There is Indiana Jones, like if you were going to describe Indiana and like his personality, like it's just kind of like manly and like but also, you know, everyone loves him and he's smart, but also like, you know, he'll just shoot you because he's like, whatever, I'm not like, you know, he's kind of like the nerdy ideal of like what a man could do and get away with.
I think that's correct. Yeah.
And then even like in the second one, I think my favorite one is the Temple of Doom. I thought I was like, man, like all these sets are fucking crazy. Like it felt like I was in like Universal Studios, like the ride type experience where it was just like everything was popping off. And Ki Kwan is so good. That child is so good, and I'm sorry for whatever trauma using that accent did on him.
Yeah.
And there is certainly things to be said about like I think Stephen has a lot of like racial things, especially during this era, that are like problematic. Um, but again, it's like the little brother thing, and like and so yes, I did enjoy these films, but I was just mostly like taken like, oh, this is why like a lot of like little straight boys are like blowing things up and shooting people and like exoticizing like they made up places, right, for these like kind of middle of nowhere
for certain
but it's
bits
like all kind of like broadly Middle Eastern. It's
I will say maybe the worst line in any of the movies, and that might not be true because I haven't seen the fourth one in a very long time. I was actually on Murtada's podcast to talk about the fourth one during his Kate Blanchett podcast,
right?
And I was like, why me? But when he meets Elsa, when he gets off the plane, she's like, Dr. Jones? And he says, yes. She goes, I knew it was you. You have your father's eyes. And he responds with, and my mother's ears, but the rest belongs to you.
And then she says, I guess all the good parts are taken then.
Yeah, she goes, the best parts have been spoken for.
It's like,
calm down, Blanche Devereaux. Like,
and again, like the only woman in these movies is that character who he bets them all. Even the Nazi one.
Even the Nazi. All I have to do is squeeze. All I have to do is scream. Yep. So anyways, but Indiana Jones is like, it's impossible to say what sort of cultural impact, or it's like impossible to not like point out what sort of cultural impact that has. I mean, it's huge. Once again, for all those intensive purposes, it shouldn't be. It's a throwback to 1940s serials. And the last time that worked was Star Wars. Oh, wait. George Lucas. Yeah. Oh. So yeah, like it's such an interesting, and I do like that also, the 80s is really, I know that it's like early 80s, but really the stereotypical action man is like an Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, like veins bulging in their muscles, and Harrison Ford himself is just such a breath of fresh air. And I know like you take umbrage with him just shooting people because he can, but also like he's not gonna win.
No, yeah. I mean, I like Harrison, I just think like kind of bigger picture. Like I had fun watching, the movies, but bigger picture, I was like,
And the only other thing I will say before we move out of Indiana Jones is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, the second one, as well as Gremlins, which I believe is also a Steven Spielberg production, are single-handedly responsible for the PG-13 rating because Spielberg had so much clout that he was able to say, no, these are not rated R films. They are something different and new. And the MPAA was like, yes, sir. So...
Gag.
That's so funny to think of it that way. Like me being very naive, I was like, he just didn't want little kids to see it. Like, no, it was very much like they were saying, we only think adults should see this. Actually, he's like, no, but the kids can.
Yeah, exactly. But I think kids really want to watch people get their hearts torn out.
Yeah, that movie is messed up.
Super messed up.
Honestly. It is like one fuck away from an R rating. Like honestly, that's all it needed.
But anything goes in Cantonese, I will say, kind of slaps.
That was fun. It's fun.
Yeah, 1982. He does this little movie that nobody remembers called E.T. the Extraterrestrial. I don't even think we have to talk about it. Nobody's ever seen it, so it's fine. We can. No, I mean it's one of the two movies that Spielberg. Well, he's amended that to say 3 movies now, but it's one of the 2 movies that Spielberg himself says he will be remembered for. It's going to be E.T. and Schindler's List, and while I don't agree necessarily with that, I think like he. Like knows the cachet of E.T. and E.T. is the movie about he decides to dip his toe back into science fiction. It's about an alien who gets abandoned on Earth and befriends a boy, and that boy decides to hide the alien until the FBI comes sneaking around and he tries to save that alien from them. It is maybe one of the best directed, like he directs the children in the movie better than any director I've ever seen. I think Drew Barrymore is really amazing in it truly, truly talented. Henry Thomas is so good. Henry Thomas is one of those sad things because now he's finally getting his due. Like now he's in a lot of Mike Flanagan stuff, but I feel like he has spent years like not being in things because of E.T.
Yeah, I will say, I famously don't like children or children actors, but my God, like from Ke Huy Quan in Temple of Doom to like this stuff to the kids in Fablemans, I am just continuously blown away by Spielberg directing these kids to like be so. I mean, fucking Elle Fanning, is it Elle or Dakota? Dakota Fanning. It's Dakota Fanning.
Dakota.
She's so good
in War of the Worlds. My God, like it's just he has a vocabulary with young actors that it's astounding. Yeah, I didn't think E.T. was like all that great, to be honest, but
I think I think you have to see E.T. as a child.
I think you do.
Love it.
I argue otherwise in that I couldn't rewatch it for this because I saw it as a little kid and it scared the freaking heck out of me. It is so disturbing. And I know other people who feel the same. Like, it is creepy. E.T. is a creepy guy.
I do think I know a lot of people who also find E.T. very scary. So I don't think you're in bad company when it comes to that. But you're right. I think it's one or two paths. It either becomes this movie that you loved as a child or this movie that terrified you as a child. And there's it's kind of no middle ground. But it's a classic for a reason. I mean, it's such a simple, smart story. Spielberg shot it in sequence so the kids wouldn't get confused. And I think that was a brilliant tactic as well to really get the performances out of them. And I think there's there's like that weird moment where the mom says something about terrorists or whatnot. Like she's like, don't dress up, like he's wearing the ghost costume. She's like, don't dress up like that. They'll think you're a terrorist. It's like, whoa, Spielberg.
I think I watched it with friend of the pod, Samantha Stallard, and she also said that she was very scared as a child watching it. But I think as adults, I was like, what do you mean those cops can't get those kids? They're like literally in cars and they're on bikes.
Because his finger was fucking glowing, Louis.
There's just a lot of like adult level like plot holes where you're like, this makes no fucking sense. But all that being said, I will always go to bat and say that Steven Spielberg knows how to make beautiful pictures. Like just like individual frames, like it's just gorgeous every single fucking time. And like the iconic scene of fucking E.T. flying across the moon, like it's just it takes a very special, it's iconic, and it takes a very special person who has a vision to be like, this is going to be a beautiful shot. And it's a majority of his films, it's like, God, every shot so beautiful.
I feel like this is around the time when it was so easy to take you can start to take Steven Spielberg for granted, honestly.
Yes.
Like, think about how many iconic movies he's already made up to this point.
Yeah.
Where like coming in as a child, seeing this, like already his reputation has preceded him with E.T., Jaws, Indiana Jones, where it's like hard to even think about it that way. And I only started to realize this when watching stuff now. Like, I think part of why I didn't even see a ton of his movies is because I was just like, well, that's just like Spielbergian, like it's fun, it's little boys, it's alien, whatever, And I feel like E.T. has all of those hallmarks where it's like, as a kid, you kind of are just like, oh, that's just Spielberg, whatever. Like that's not doing anything interesting. But then actually engaging with it in its own context, it is easier to see like, oh, actually, this is like a beautifully made film. Like he knows what he's doing as a filmmaker.
The public wants to see a story, and a story told well. They're not that interested in whether I direct or Lucas directs or Barbara Streisand stars in it. They just want a good story. And they'll discriminate against filmmakers sort of rattling our timbers, shaking our timbers to say, we don't care about you, we want the stories you're telling.
I think also, just to add on to that, not to pile on to Spielberg, but I think he's also sort of what the kids would refer to as diluting his brand now, because he's also off producing lots of things. He opened a fucking restaurant. He's designing theme park rides, you know, so he's like doing a ton. And like the list, like if you haven't seen a Spielberg movie, you've seen a movie he's produced, at least. I mean, Gremlins, Back to the Future, The Goonies, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Joe versus the Volcano, Arachnophobia, Martin Scorsese's Cape Fear, Harry and the Hendersons, Young Sherlock Holmes, 2 Don Bluth movies, The Land Before Time and An American Tale. Like, it's just, you know, he's everywhere. And also, after E.T., I think he's a little desperate because of exactly what you're talking about to be taken a little more seriously. And so he's like, I'm going to stop doing genre pictures. I'm going to do serious adult movies. And the first thing he does is 1985's Alice Walker adaptation of The Color Purple. And he follows that up with the 1987 J.G. Ballard adaptation of Empire of the Sun. I have actually seen maybe more than any of his other movies, The Color Purple. It's really good, and it sucks that a white guy had to direct it, but I'm glad that he like cast it the way he did. I'm glad that he got Quincy Jones to do the music, who was a producer on the movie, so it's not like, you know, it's not like he had to go far to get Quincy Jones. But yeah, I think it's a really beautiful movie. I did watch the musical finally and was kind of like, I had the same issue that you did, Louis, where I was like, light these fucking musical numbers. Like,
imagine a musical full of joy and color in the dark.
Yeah. I was like, I can see they're wearing pants. I want to see their faces.
Yeah. But the 85 version, we talked about it way back in our Whoopi Goldberg episode.
Yes.
It is quite stunning. Oprah is popping off. Whoopi's
oh my god, that was the other thing that bothered me about the musical, and I'm not going to talk about the musical very much either, but like the shit that goes down with Oprah is horrific, and the musical's kind of like, it happened, whatever, and she's fine afterwards. And I was like, she literally has like a huge scar on her face, her eye is like fucked up. Come on guys. I know that that's not pretty for a musical, but like,
yeah, strange. But all that to say, you know, Color Purple famously got nominated for everything, didn't win anything. But no. I think it is a stunning film. I didn't rewatch it for this, but I can the image of Whoopi Goldberg and her like beautiful like big eyes and her smiling will never leave my brain. You know, like it's so good.
This Sugar Avery, friend of the family. Fix up the spare room.
I can't move. I need to see her eyes. I feel like once I see her eyes, then my feet can let go of the spot they stuck in. You sure is ugly.
He has commented on people being upset at him not making the lesbian relationship more explicit. And I will give him credit. He basically says, maybe 10 years after I would have done that, he's like, but that wasn't me back then, and I just wasn't the person to do it. And honestly, like, probably right.
In 1985, maybe?
Yeah. I mean, I would love it. Yeah. Like, that's a whole big part of that novel. But like
that's one of the positives of the musical. Like I was like, yes. But
Empire of the Sun also a novel. Well, actually, it's an autobiography about a boy who spends many years in a Japanese internment camp. Let me reword that in a way. He is in an internment camp in an internment camp run by Japanese. At the end of World War II. And
that child is Christian Bale.
I had never seen it before. It was one of the ones. I watched it for this. I thought it was fine.
I like the music. I like the music in it a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's a very like incredible story for sure. But also like, and I mean, and not to be that guy, but I'm like, the story of a white man during like this war. I don't know.
Like a rich white child too.
Right.
And that's the
There
like the critics went after him. They actually did. I mean, a lot of them were like, yeah, it looks beautiful. The atomic bomb sequence, which also, by the way, atomic bomb sequence may be a little insensitive, but also probably happens that way in the book. But they were like, there was so much like starvation and violence in this period, and this movie just sort of like glosses over that to be like, look at the story of this boy.
Yeah, I wrote on my letterbox, because I'm a letterbox user now, that like it's not unmoving. There are scenes, like there's a scene where he's like up, like Christian Bale, like really so fucking good, even as a child, like is breaking down, and I was like, oh my god. But all of the emotion like is overshadowed with, because Spielberg is like the blockbuster guy. Like I think he fucking is in love with, you know, bombast and like explosions and like big things that kind of overshadow a lot of those emotional moments. But like not like, you know, completely unmoving. Like it is,
yes,
but a little bit maybe off the target of like what a movie about World War.
Yeah, I found it surprisingly a little cold, I'll be honest. I think the most thing that moved me was the Miranda Richardson scene where he like holds her hand while she dies and like wakes up in the morning next to her dead body, and I was like, but once again, like that's the one woman in the movie.
True.
I didn't end up watching this one because at some point I was like, I can't be watching 2 hour 55-minute movies every single day about war. But I was gonna say it's interesting talking about these in the chronological order, because when I think about Spielberg, obviously we're talking about like fun and adventure. The other thing I think about a lot is like war movies.
Yeah.
And this is the first real 1941 does not really count, right?
No,
this is like the first war movie on the list. And I'm like, oh, wow, it took until 87 for him to do that. And then I think the 90s is like, there's a lot of that. But maybe it just feels that way to me. But I feel like this is maybe the start of the war era. Maybe this is like, that's how he sees his dramatic turn.
I also think personally he's reconciling himself with his religion too, and that's starting to creep back in, and I think it's starting to weigh on him, and he sees sort of his responsibility as a filmmaker to do at least some chronicling of the American story. And I think that's why some of these, he's never said this is all supposition on my part, but I do feel like a lot of his movies, barring like War Horse, are like about you know, the American, though I guess they are British in this too. But I do feel like he feels a responsibility to the horrors of the 20th century and the stuff that like he grew up around or lived through, or even like affected the people in his family coming up. And so I think that he's sort of grappling with, you know, when you get this popular, because he could have made like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. He could have made E.T. Part 2, you know, Electric Boogaloo. And he doesn't. And I do want to commend him on that he like dug deeper into the well that is, you know, our collective history, and is like, there are some stories that I could tell that I think like the impact of me being who I am would get people to see them. Once again, though, like, it does suck that a white guy had to direct Color Purple. But it's beautiful. It's beautiful. 89, he rounds out the 80s with Always, starring Richard Dreyfuss. It's a remake of A Guy Named Joe, which was a movie he loved from a kid. It's a mistake. And but great use of... It's not good. Did you like Always? I feel like if you go back to our Audrey Hepburn episode, you did not
like A Guy Named Joe. But like, no, I just think Holly Hunter is an icon, and she's
Holly Hunter and John Goodman are amazing in it. No shade to them.
And I love that she's like wearing like a color guard uniform as like the dress that's so beautiful. I'm like, this is a costume.
Well, that's why I love that Audrey Hepburn. I think Audrey Hepburn's great in it too, and I love that Audrey Hepburn's like an angel, and what she's wearing is like a fucking white turtleneck. Like she showed up in her costume, was like, "This is what I will be wearing." Like,
yeah, true. I don't know. The schmaltz got me again. Schmaltz.
Yeah,
it got me. Also, whoever the guy is, who's like the new guy, so handsome.
Yes.
Oh my
very
god.
handsome.
Yeah. I don't know. I liked it.
I genuinely, I dare you to go back and listen to our Audrey Hepburn episode. I feel like you did not.
I didn't watch it for that one. I didn't watch it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's. I mean, I.
She's in two scenes.
Yeah, I actually like it more than I'm letting on, but I do think it's not good.
Okay.
That's my dichotomy. I watched a YouTube video that was so angry about it because I was trying to watch I was just watching rankings.
Yeah.
There was one extremely obnoxious YouTube video where it took 18 minutes for him to even just get to his number 36 pick,
oh my God.
Dead last. Horrible video. But he went off on this movie.
Which is hilarious because there are worse Spielberg projects.
Right. But he was like, oh, this is insulting to anyone's intelligence. Spielberg should go to jail for this one. He hated it.
See, that's what I'm afraid of when people listen to our show. I'm afraid of people thinking I'm like that. I never want to be that guy. That is not, I am not invested. I love movies. I work as an editor, but I am not invested enough to be like, this person should die for the thing that they made that they loved.
It's just for always, it's schmaltzy. It's very rom-com. It's, it's very unserious, but if you like The Notebook, I think you would like Always. How about that?
Starting the 90s, Spielberg himself says he feels artistically stalled. He's not sure what he wants to do. And then the first thing he does is 1991's Hook, which is a pseudo sequel, well, actually really just a sequel to Peter Pan, starring Robin Williams. Peter Pan has forgotten that he is Peter Pan and has to go to Neverland to rescue his children. And in doing so, remember that he was the boy who never wanted to grow up. Famously, Spielberg did not get along with Julia Roberts, and cue the Shea rattle. He said he would never work with her again on 60 Minutes. What a little bitch he is. He is such like I said, he's shady.
I guess she was not who she is now, but also why say that about anybody?
I mean, she's also
I've heard some things about Julia Roberts.
Yeah.
I heard she ain't so nice.
Yeah. And
I've read about Aloe Vera many times to know this woman is a little high on the binge scale a little bit.
And I don't want to defend her because I don't know her and I don't know the situation as it went down, but she's kind of said, I'm a woman in this industry and it really doesn't help when the most famous director alive, and I'm paraphrasing here, but when the most famous director alive basically calls you a bitch on the news,
yeah.
So does it really help my career at all to air the dirty laundry?
Right. He could have said nothing.
Yeah.
And just not worked with her again.
And what he could have said was nothing.
I think we've talked about Hook before. I think we are very medium to less medium on Hook.
Run home, Jack. Run home, Jack.
I famously do not like the genre of movie where rich dads who work hard are chastised for working and not loving their kids enough. But that's just me.
But honestly, if he loved his kids just a little more, he wouldn't have had to go to Neverland.
Some dads have to work, guys.
Yeah, it wasn't received well by critics. Audiences didn't flock. It is quite the spectacle. I'll give it that. I think everybody remembers Rufio. But I think the 90s really begin for Steven Spielberg in 1993 with Jurassic Park.
Thank God.
It's based off the 1990 novel by Michael Crichton about big old dummy dumb who decides to bring back dinosaurs and then invite a bunch of paleontologists to his theme park to be eaten by them. That's
great. It's great. It's
Cliff's
great.
Notes. I love Jurassic Park. I remember seeing it in the theater with my granny in Missouri. And Yeah, I think everybody's seen Jurassic Park. I'll let you two take the floor, but it's great. Laura Dern.
It's
Sam
so good.
Neill.
So good. The last time I watched that movie was in a club on mute, and the club be watching the TV.
Yes.
Honestly,
Yes.
it got that vibe.
Yes.
You put Jurassic Park on mute in a club, and everyone will be watching. Like that is peak the tension, the thrill, the fun.
Yeah.
It's just a purely enjoyable movie. It's also like one of my favorite genres of movie is the TV movie, in the sense that if it's on TV, you'll watch it no matter
you watch it.
how far along it is. Like that is exactly what this movie is.
It's also
where it's just like you just turn it on and it's still going to be a good time.
Right. So what reminded me was like, oh my God, this is why Jordan Peele made Nope. It's like I was thinking about like Malevolent, or maybe not Malevolent, but it's like wild animals, wild creatures as entertainment, and like how fucking stupid we are as people to try and like tame nature and wildness. And I love fucking Nope. And
oh yeah, it's great. I just think of the Maya Rudolph, like, to what end? To what end?
Very
like,
that. Entertainment for what?
Yeah, don't you see the danger, John, inherent in what you're doing here? Genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid that's found his dad's gun.
It's hardly appropriate to start hurling generalizations.
If I may, I'll tell you the problem with the scientific power that you're using here. It didn't require any discipline to attain it. You know, you read what others had done, and you took the next step. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility for it. You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it. You want to sell it. Well,
I don't think you're giving us our due credit. Our scientists have done things which nobody's ever done before.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
But also, Jurassic Park, I think, must be said, like, it is a technological marvel.
Oh my God.
Like, those dinosaurs look fucking real. Like, watch it today, and you're like...
To this day. And I mean, part of that is the genius of Spielberg, that it was, you know, a combination of animatronic and CG. Originally, I guess they tried to sell them on stop motion, and it would have just looked like a Ray Harryhausen movie. And I fucking love Ray Harryhausen movie, but 1993 was not the time to be doing that. And
no,
yeah, it's just gorgeous. And one of the most brilliant things is most of the movie's set at night. But even when that T-Rex storms into the center towards the end of the movie, and that banner's falling,
iconic.
It looks so good.
Well, like the visceral magic of like when they are on top of like a stegosaurus or whatever, and it's breathing hard because it's like it's sick. Like it puts you right there. This is like something you can touch and feel, and like obviously they can do that now with CGI, but like I don't know, man. Like there is just something really special watching Jurassic Park and be like, wow, in 1993 they had movies that looked this good. Yeah, it's great.
Allegra, just real quick to go back to you watching at the club, I would like to just imagine Jeff Goldblum was sitting next to you, just mouthing all of his words. Just doing his lines.
Life finds a way.
I wish. That club, Whiskey Brooklyn, baby, in Greenpoint. I watched Avatar there. I watched Charlie's Angels there.
I actually do believe
movies.
that's the suggested James Cameron way to watch Avatar, on mute in a bar.
Yeah, that's the only way I've seen that movie. Good movie.
To break up the levity a little bit, in 1993, Spielberg directs maybe his most mature film to date at the time, Schindler's List, a movie about Oskar Schindler, who was a businessman who helped save 1,100 Jews from the Holocaust. It is a black and white film. I mean, one of the things that it's funny because it comes out in the same year as Jurassic Park. And actually what happens is like Spielberg sort of steps away from Jurassic Park while he's waiting for the special effects to like get done, make Schindler's List. And this happens a lot in his career where he ends up having like more than one movie come out because of all the special effects needed on a certain movie. And he's able to go do something else. It's black and white. It is, devoid of any of his normal tricks. It's the camera movements are mostly handheld if they move. It doesn't have the sweeping sort of nature of his other movies. Yeah, it's truly a tough movie to talk about. I sent Louis a really great article my boyfriend sent me about a Holocaust survivor referring to it as kitsch. I've got no dog in that fight. It was not my experience, but I just wanted to be known that it wasn't universally loved by everybody, even though it became a huge hit. And hey, listen, like, it's an important story, and yet even this writer concedes in his essay, like, maybe it's good that this many audiences went out to see this thing, but he's like, they will never know the true terror and the true visceralness of what happened to me and my friends. And yeah,
it's a microcosm, I think, of all that went on in 7 years, and told in both civilized and uncivilized terms. And I'm very anxious to see if there is a possibility of making a very uncommercial movie out of a rather remarkable idea.
It's such a tough movie to get through. I certainly paused. I was like, hold on. Literally, Voldemort is like shooting Jews from like his tower.
Yeah.
Nonchalantly. And I was like, oh my God, please. It is number one. I did not know it was. I know the Holocaust is a real thing that happened. I did not know that Oskar Schindler was a real person. I did not know that like this was a real man, that this really happened. And as it was happening, before I realized it was a real story, I was thinking like, is this a movie about a good German saving Jews? And like that, I was like, I was thinking of like, man, sometimes he centers like the wrong person in these stories. And then I realized he's a real person, and I was like, oh yeah, that's fucking crazy. And like, you know, a very engaging story.
Right.
And
I will like not interrupt you, but I will say he goes out of his way to make sure that you don't actually think Oskar Schindler is that good of a person. Oskar Schindler is a very flawed man who recognized something horrible was happening.
Right.
And did something good, which I will say is a lot. He gives a lot more grace to fucking I suddenly can't think of her name in the Post. That like
Meryl Streep,
old Republican woman,
Catherine Graham.
Yeah, Catherine Graham. He gives a lot more grace to her than he does to Oskar Schindler. I will just say that. But
yeah, I mean, I will just say like it is not a fun or good time watching this movie, but like by the end of it, I was like, man, what a work of catharsis.
Yeah,
just what like. When it turns into color and you see like the actual like survivors or like the generations of people that came from the people he saved, I lost it. It's that type of movie, you know?
It's really it felt like social studies core to me. Somewhat derogatory.
I mean, and you're more than welcome to feel that way. You're absolutely more than welcome to feel that way. Like,
to me, it's like this was when he was getting into his sort of self-important era. I think this was the start of that. Like 1993 is the two genders of Spielberg.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Boys in Jurassic Park and like boring dads in Schindler's List.
Yeah, exactly. And watching this one, I was like, okay, I learned. I think I know which gender I prefer. But I think, you know, to me, this really affirmed for me that he's a great director of actors, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, Ralph Fiennes is so good in this movie, honestly. Like, I could not particularly care for most of the details. I actually went to the Schindler's museum in Krakow, which was really cool. So I knew a lot about the story already going in. But to me, I was like, why am I so into the Nazi? Like, this is such a great performance. Like, I'm here for the Nazi in this movie. Like, he is a good dang director of this actor.
You know what's funny on the reverse side, and Liam Neeson is problematic in his own right. Liam Neeson famously like really didn't like working with Spielberg at first, he said they shot that close up of him smoking the cigarette, and Spielberg was literally telling him when to breathe. And he like stormed off set and was like, he's fucking telling me when to breathe. Like that's not acting, that's puppetry. Like, I don't want to be a puppet. And Ben Kingsley famously said to him, yes, but every conductor needs a good soloist. So,
wow.
That's.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think to the social studies of it all, like, and again, I just have this feeling of like, there was like the little Nazi boy who like, oh, Mrs. Whatever, like, I'll help you. Like he loves just like, I think he thinks he's like shading in these like gray areas, but it's just kind of very much heavy-handed of like, actually, we have the capability to be good and bad. It's just kind of like heavy-handed. And to me, it wasn't like, oh, there was just a little bit too much of like, there are Germans that are good, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely get that. I do think his gambit pays off, though. I mean, he wins Best Director at the Academy Awards. The film gets 7 BAFTAs, 3 Golden Globes. It's been named by the American Film Institute one of the 100 best movies ever made. It's certainly, I think it just catapulted his career even further. I feel like this is really cementing him in like, okay, like, well, now he's had hits in the 70s, he's had hits in the 80s, he has hits in the 90s, like he
and
is
serious
like,
movies, like
yes,
high-minded movies.
Let me just say, there are 350,000 survivors of the Holocaust alive today. I implore all the educators who are watching this program to please do not allow the Holocaust to remain a footnote in history. Please teach this in your schools. There are 350,000 experts who just want to be useful with the remainder of their lives. Please listen to the words and the echoes and the ghosts, and please teach this in your schools. Thank you very, very much for this.
He goes off with Jeffrey Katzenberg and David Geffen, founds DreamWorks, which is in 1994 is going to be the new film studio. It's the first film studio that's been brought about in like 30 years. They're really sort of trying to take a page out of United Artists' book from 1919. DreamWorks, I don't want to get into it too much. It's like off and on, like works and it doesn't work. Funny enough, we did an entire DreamWorks animation episode. DreamWorks Animation splits off from DreamWorks, and now DreamWorks apparently has to rent their logo from DreamWorks Animation.
Wow.
Take that as you will.
Business.
He also, like, as I mentioned, theme park rides. He's doing the Jurassic Park ride. And he also takes a break from directing. As I imagine, Jurassic Park, Schindler's List was a really hard thing to do back to back. But then he comes back in 1997 with Jurassic Park, The Lost World Jurassic Park, and Amistad. This is once again the two genders of Steven Spielberg. You have the fun boy adventure in The Lost World, and you have the serious dad movie in Amistad. I don't think either are particularly that good. I mean, literally the best thing in The Lost World is it's him wanting to make his Godzilla movie. And the T-Rex goes on a rampage in Los Angeles at the end of the movie. That's the fun bit. You just have to get there.
Yeah.
and getting there requires you to watch Vince Vaughn. And
Vince Vaughn catching strays on the pod. Oh my God.
And then Amistad, I feel like we talked about Amistad recently, and I don't remember quite why. It's whoever plays the president in Amistad was an episode we did.
I was trying so hard to like get to Amistad. I just couldn't.
Oh no, it was Anna Paquin.
Is she in this?
Yeah, she's the little queen of Spain.
Aw.
Yeah, little queen of Spain.
It's cute. It's fine.
And again, like he's tackling some like pretty heavy like subject matter here.
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to because I was like, this is a very serious film, but like, whatever.
1988's Saving Private Ryan.
My God.
Here we are. Here's your war movie, Allegra.
Now this though,
yeah,
this is a good ass war movie.
I think it's such a smart tactic to. There are war movies that kind of glorify war. I think this movie is the exact opposite of that, while still being very much a war movie. It's not a protest movie like Full Metal Jacket in any way or means. It is a movie about war, but it's a movie that's like really honest about the visceral brutality of war. I mean, that opening shot of them doing Omaha Beach and the bullets just slicing through bodies, and it's horrific and it's grotesque. It like really, he taps into that horror background, but he's like, but this is a real horror. This is not, your son being possessed or a mysterious truck coming after you. Like, this is the pain and grizzle of this thing that we do to each other. I've literally not seen Saving Private Ryan since I saw it in the theater. I did not feel the need to rewatch it. I've had to see the Omaha Beach scene separately because I snuck into it because my mom was seeing it, and I wanted to I was seeing another movie and the other movie ended, and then I went in and I just missed the entire opening. So I've never seen that on the big screen, which is the thing. But yeah, good movie.
Wait, so you watched it in 1998?
Yes. Yeah.
That's the last time you watched it?
Yeah,
wow.
I'm old, Allegra. I'm old.
Dang. I mean, I watched it for the first time for this, but I had watched the opening scene in school. So I thought it was social studies core at first.
But then now you know better.
Now I know better. It's gripping. The characters are great. I mean, the direction is amazing. The Omaha Beach scene is incredible, but the whole film, the way it's told, the way it's designed, I mean, yeah, to me, it really feels like his Apocalypse Now, which I think maybe is what he was going for here. In some way, but just incredible war movie, very humane, just so fun, so engrossing. I was surprised by how much I loved it.
Ryan, I don't know anything about Ryan. I don't care. Man means nothing to me. It's just a name. But if going to Ramel and finding him so he can go home, if that earns me the right to get back to my wife, well, then that's my mission.
You heard it here first. Allegra Frank, Saving Private Ryan. Fun!
Fun! It was a fun watch.
I also love, and again, this goes back to him, being such a good, actor's director. The young men he casts in this movie, that are in this movie, it's just, banger after banger performance. I also didn't rewatch this. I saw it more recent than 1998, but
listen, I'm not made of time.
I'm saying I did not rewatch it. But what I was thinking about it when I'm jumping ahead when I watched War Horse though, because I was it's crazy how War Horse is his war for kids movie, because there's no blood and no grizzle at all, and Saving Private Ryan is just all of that. So it's interesting how he operates on these levels of warness.
I don't have much to say about War Horse, so I'm just going to get this out of the way now because I probably don't really care to talk about it later. I saw it in the theater when it came out. I've not revisited it. But I love when The Good Wife would occasionally slip into surreal bits. And one of my favorite things is there's a political dinner that's being held for her husband at one point, and they're like, we have the cast of War Cow here, and they're doing scenes from War Cow in the background.
Are you literally talking about the show The Good Wife?
Yeah, I'm talking about the show The Good Wife. Take that. I really like the Kings, so
okay.
I've not dipped my toe into Elsbeth yet, but maybe I will.
All that to say, Saving Private Ryan, very good.
Very
tough to watch though.
Fun watch, frankly, but difficult. Schindler's List, tough watch.
Not fun.
Saving Private Ryan, tough watch, but fun.
Fun.
There's a difference there.
Very different.
It's along the spectrum, but different ends. And we're going to hit pause on our conversation about Steven Spielberg, but we will be back with part 2 of our episode on Steven Spielberg with special guest Allegra Frank. Thank you for listening to The Mixed Reviews. If you want to contact us, you can always find us on Twitter at The Mixed Reviews. You can follow us on Instagram at _mixed_reviews. You can write us an email at reviewsmixed@gmail.com. And if you want to listen to our back catalog of episodes, just like you listen to this one, you can find them on any major podcast app, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen. The Mixed Reviews is a proud member of the Glitterjaw Queer Podcast Collective.